Welcome back, everyone, to Underworld Party. I'm Dare, and we're opening this ceremony of conversation today with Lee Hogan Knott. And I just want to say a few words about that and about sort of maybe the theme of what I'm trying to do here with some of these newer episodes. Um, I'm here on the custodial, traditionally stewarded lands of the Chinook and many other people in the Pacific Northwest. And I've been really thinking about what is it to go beyond land acknowledgement. We have a lot of these DEI processes, everyone's talking about land acknowledgement. And I think for many of the practicing animists, we're realizing that it rings pretty hollow, saying these weird scripts that are like really morbid and kind of like talking about things in the past, like they're gone or something. So I want to talk about, what is it to go beyond land acknowledgement, to go deeper into right relationship, and to have fun doing that. And so uh, me and Lee are going to talk about that, and of course, all of our ancestors are going to talk about that too. So I'm going to give it over to Lee. Introduce yourself, say whatever prayers you want to say, and we'll just kind of yarn together.
Thanks, dear. I think I want to start with acknowledging the rain that is falling right now and the land that I walked on this morning was full of buttercup and grass. And I've been being visited a lot by hummingbirds right now, being very busy with their preparations. And I want to acknowledge the Coast Salish people who've been caregiving for this land for a very long time. And all of our ancestors and my relatives that gave me permission to be here today and are encouraging me to speak. So
Yeah,
that's my prayer for today.
yeah, patting you on the hip. Get up
Yeah, saying,
there.
come on,
Cool.
let's go, girl.
Yeah, good. Well, let's do a little bit more context. Tell me a bit about like where you're situated in terms of like what you're sort of doing and who you're being in the world and the land that you're on and sort of that kind of trajectory and just yeah, we'll start to place it in that kind of relational behavioral kind of model for a second.
So I grew up where I am. I started out very young, having a, a very close relationship with the land, not in my family per se. It was more of a very intellectualized relationship because of family traumas and how they related to the land. So I grew up having this very deep relationship that wasn't really acknowledged in the way that I conducted myself. And so being guided through lots of different ways of how to perform in colonized America, specifically Seattle. And I went through a lot of processes of trying to legitimize the deep relationship that I had with everything around me, knowing that everything was alive, trying to intellectualize it for a long time. And then finally, just through a series of deep initiations, realizing that I couldn't do it anymore. And then also heartbreak of recognizing that there was at the time, no one that I could relate to other than the earth.
Yeah,
That
right.
was like human beings were shit.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think we've
So
all been there. Like, oh, wait a
yeah.
second. Wait a second. This relationship game is pretty bonkers.
Right. And so just deeply finding, I came to permaculture
Mhm.
in the early 2000s. I was living in Hawaii. I had moved there to completely, basically live off grid, living on a sailboat, not wanting to engage in any kind of capitalistic exchange. I was doing everything as an exchange-based economy,
Mhm.
pretty much very minimalistic, using money. And permaculture was the first structure that I found that I felt like I had access to, that had any kind of relationship context for me that was beyond what I felt was right. So I learned that pretty deeply, and then started moving in those circles, had children, and then understood through that initiation that human beings could be maybe trusted, because I had a doula. A lot of the sensations and knowledge that I had was there in a lot of birth work.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, so human beings maybe aren't just like the parasites that
Yeah,
need to be killed.
yeah, totally.
So that helped me get into a little bit more trusting of what relationship in terms of being with humans could look like. And then also parenting my own children. So I was like, okay, well, if it wasn't done right for me, and nobody else is doing it right that I see, except for these different teachers of like Janet Lansbury, I think she wrote a book about attachment parenting and parenting from the inside out. And like that really woke me up a lot. And then there was this is in like 2007. So there's some talk in some circles about Indigenous based parenting,
Right.
but there was no larger language, about it in my circles. And so I just started doing what I felt was right. And I created a school that was based in permaculture, but also based in something called a Sudbury Model, that was all about individuation of learning and listening to your own. I mean, that's what attachment parenting is too. It's like really being in right relationship with your children and seeing them as full beings.
Right.
So that just created the structure going out, and I created a school based on that. And so my early teenage years was a lot of activism work, especially in Seattle. Like WTO was happening when I was in high school, participated in that. And so I started getting a lot more understanding of how to like work in the systems, of how to reset some right relationships. But I did it in a really aggressive way.
Yeah, sure.
I was really angry still. I had things happen in my own life where people were telling me how I needed to. I mean, I glossed over that, but I had my own mental health issues when I was a teenager. And that was really the initiation of being like, you guys don't know what you're talking about in terms of what's going on with me. I know I'm going to go live on a sailboat
Yeah, totally.
and learn permaculture and live off with the land, and, have talks with the land in Hawaii is just like,
Yeah,
here
right.
I am
Right.
for
There's
you,
your
the ocean.
therapist. There's your therapist.
Right.
You know,
Exactly.
whatever.
Exactly. And that's where I've always gone, is like, I've tried to do allopathic
Yeah.
therapy and all of that, and it never worked for me. It just was so judgmental and so in the head. I needed the body.
Yeah.
I needed to be moving through all those sensations, and also embrace. I mean, that's what happened when I became a parent. It's like having this unconditional love, like just, I mean, that's what I felt from the earth.
Yeah. Right.
So here I am having this unconditional love for another being. I'm like, everybody has this capacity. We are all born with it. Like, it's our birthright
Right.
to live like this, and we've been trained out of it. And so that's why the school came out of that. It's like, okay, if we've been trained out of it, if we have a sanctuary where that is happening, those relationships are happening, and it's also with the earth,
Yeah.
So we're caregiving in the permaculture way, which is actually indigenous knowledge based.
Right. Right.
Like
Right.
it,
Right. We
but
just
that
call
was
it
my,
permaculture.
right, that was my access to it, because it gave me permission, because I thought I had been conditioned at the time, this is the only way to think of, like, this overculture is the only way to survive. So this way of thinking about it. And then it's like, oh, you can create this
Yeah.
way of being without all the like structuring
Right.
and of the permaculture ideology and the certification and all of, all
Right.
of that.
Right.
So I ended up having this school that was really awesome, but I was in a relationship that was, the ideology was there, but the practice and the relationship was not.
Uh-huh.
And it really shook me out of thinking that I could will my will with another person
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
and become in right relationship. That I had to redirect, and this is where I am now, is
Yeah.
redirect my energies into, and it's the same thing in permaculture. It's like you can't ask the ground or the earth to give you something that it's not ready to get, like it's not
Right. It's not
nourished.
prepared. It's not like fecund in that way. It's not there, like the fruit is not ripe, right? It's like the
Right.
seed is not germinated or
Well,
whatever.
and for me, it's like even the soil is not alive in the way of what you're feeding it. It's like
Hmm.
you need, so you want it to grow corn, well, you better feed it, or it's going to grow these corns that are like,
Right, right.
twisted and
It's gonna grow the corn that it can grow because it's a reflection of the larger reciprocity of the reciprocal relationship. I want to just talk. I want to sort of touch a few things that you said and then sort of go deeper in.
yeah,
Like I like that you called the school a sanctuary. I think that that is freaking amazing because learning is sacred if it's done in the way that really recognizes the each being's sort of like emergent process of discovery, whatever that is, like whatever you are drawn to or whatever, like we use all these words to talk about desire and pleasure and preference. But I do think that when you're with kids or teaching kids, which I did for a little bit of time, you can really smell or see, you can really sense the naturalness of their wanting to learn, but it's not like a top down kind of thing. It's just that they want to learn what they want to learn for whatever mysterious reasons that is. Um,
hang on a second, I think my video just faltered.
oh, yeah, no worries.
um but yeah, you're exactly right. Like that's the key, is that what is happening with the land is happening within the spirit of a child. They are coming with whatever it is that they've been given by their parents, their ancestors, the context that they're
Yes,
in.
that's right.
And so you can't be willing them and forcing them. It's this relationship. And with children, there, I mean, there's a commodity ideology that is with children in our culture, and breaking everyone out of that mindset it's so challenging. Yeah, so creating sanctuary is something, I mean, that is a word that people came to me with, of like, this is such a sanctuary, this is, I mean, like, that was the sense, because there was a sensation of allowing, of whatever you are is showing up as, whatever you're bringing into this moment is allowed. There's no judgment of, well, it's not right, it's not correct, or and also you may have internal goals, but external goals that other people are putting on you are not yours. And so I'm going to protect you from that as well. And that was part of the school's process of there's so much anxiety of parents and I see this as a reflection of us, ourselves, on ourselves. So this has grown into my therapeutic work, is that there's so much need for us to be correct in whatever context that we're in, that we stop listening to those internal wisdoms that we have, that we've been gifted, and allowing space for that. That's where healing happens. That's where we can track ourselves so that we know what the next step to do is. Mm-hmm. In terms of our own internal goals. But without that space created,
right,
you're going to be jumping from external expectation to external expectation, even within your own self.
Right.
So yeah.
So it sounds to me like this idea of sanctuary is almost like it's a compound of like, you have to have this nourishment quality, because if you're feeding the land and you're feeding the children in the right way, they're going to sort of grow in a good way, right? It's like just, but then there's also this idea of protection, right? So you have to protect and nourish. It's not just one or the other.
Exactly. Yeah, both of those energies need to be happening, is and having the discernment between those two mm-hmm. is a lifelong process internally, mm-hmm. and also with the land. And that to me comes into the idea of this. A lot of people are like conservatorship of land, or like we're going to keep it safe away from humans, or we're going to let it be its wildness, right, without us. And I just feel that that's where we're at, is learning how to be, and that's why I'm so attracted to talking with you about it, is that how to be in right relationship with your land that you're on,
right,
is what we're all learning how to do. And rather than saying, and that's one of the things that I learned through, I went to so one of my big turning points in education was I went to a place called Wilderness Awareness, which is outside of Seattle. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, my video it's saying failing to start.
Oh, sorry. No worries.
We're
still here.
I would love to be on. I don't know what's happening with it, but technology, I swear I have, there's something that happens with me in technology. It doesn't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then we're going to just listen very well.
Okay.
So tell me, so there's this place you went in Seattle. What was the name again?
Oh, it's called Wilderness Awareness. And okay. I started actually connecting with them when I was in my teens. I had a very important person to me was connected to them. And so I went and did this education called Coyote Mentoring, mm-hmm. which was a lot about working with children and working with that energy of creating sanctuary, but then also teasing out within children and adults. I mean, it's scalable,
right,
of course, because we're all children, really,
right.
And so being able to listen for the right questions, and listen how to really, really listen. And that was one of the things I wanted to bring to this, is and this is a fundamental tenet of permaculture work too. And then also in since beyond all of that of indigenous knowledge-based systems, that listening is such an important skill. And for me, when I was doing my school, it was one of the hardest things to continue to practice because of the noise of all, and this is what I was talking about before. Internally, this happens too, is that all the noise of the overculture saying what we need to be doing and how this needs to happen, and how to get permission from all these systems and structures to continue to be in this way. And that is where I think that my deep practice is getting super well at being able to listen and sit and be still. And one of the reason why I brought up wilderness awareness is because it's a structure that one of the practices is a thing called sit spot.
Mhm.
And being able to go and be in nature for a long period of time and listen and watch. And it's basically a meditation,
Right.
but it's a sensory meditation.
Right.
So you are a part of all of these energies that are coming to you, and being in a place of receptivity.
Mhm.
That's the first important step of being in right relationship for me,
Mhm.
is really being able to listen to what is being given to you.
Right.
And
And that sort of I didn't mean to cut you off, but that
no,
sort of
that's good.
that goes sort of into the idea of like, you kind of have to take your willpower or your aggressive version of willpower and you have to subvert it with this kind of other larger task, right? It's like, like your willpower wants to do things, but there's a willpower in sort of like not doing and receiving and listening and waiting and all this other stuff.
Right, right. And it's becoming, for me, it's becoming in love,
Mm,
the sensation of loving that waiting. And it has become for me that practice of waiting and listening joyous, because I know it's coming. I know the relationship is coming.
mm,
And so it is, but at first it's very difficult. And I'm not even at first, like, it's a cyclical thing.
right.
Yeah, you just learn how to do it deeper and deeper and deeper. When I was, one of the significant moments for me is when I was at the school and having all of those very intense situations happen where I felt violated or not listened to, or just felt like I was losing myself. Going into being with my animals, the ones that I was caregiving for, the plants, the ocean, being able to be and sit and listen was so healing, because I heard, and this is something that that is a memory from my early childhood and beyond, is that when I could sit and listen, I felt the love the land had for me.
Right.
And that gave me the will to continue in the other practices that I was doing, that I was doing it in a right way, and I was doing it in the way that I was being asked to do. And I would also be able to see more by doing that. See, there's something in outdoor education that we call like the green wall, where you look at nature. A lot of people have this when they haven't been in sitting with the earth at all, and they just see every plant as the same thing. Like there's no differentiation. There's no ability to discern a fern from a cedar. It's like they're all green and they're all living, but that's it. That's all I know. And when you're able to sit, you can start seeing the relationships they have with each other.
Mhm.
And that can become, I mean, and then you have, for us, it's then you have conversations with other people that are doing that as well. And then you're like, hey, this is a thing that happened to me. And they're like, oh yeah, I saw this too. And then you can also go into, so in our school, but also in my practice in therapeutic work, is like, then you have conversations about, well, what did that cause in you as a sensation to feel? And like, how does that align with other things that you are witnessing within yourself? Or do you feel a sense of kinship with that? Not,
Okay.
I wouldn't necessarily say that when I'm first working with someone, but that
Right.
is
We're
where it
jumping ahead a
goes.
little, but it's
Right.
it's the secret. These are the secrets.
Right. 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 And so that's like the opening of the door
Right.
to being in relationship. And then it is a secret. You say that it's like a secret. It is, I feel like it's this great secret that so many people um aren't given permission to access, is that we have these like, oh, spirit beings and like all these like esoteric ideas of what, and it's like, well, actually it's just, the centipede that crawls across your foot, or like, it's not necessarily just eagle.
Right. 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 Right.
Yeah. So, and getting down into the processes that are happening. I mean, that was one of the lessons that I would teach a lot in that in the school with, and then also when talking with, it's harder with adults though, because they have so much judgment.
Yeah.
That seeing the metaphors for what is happening in the larger context in nature is happening within ourselves, and it's also happening within our culture. It's just layered on all of these different broken up contexts that we haven't been able to have a larger like immersion into. It's this compartmentalized, like, this is ecology and this is biology and this is blah 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 blah, blah, and they're all related and they're all in relation. And so being able to first start with yourself and your relationship with those things,
Mhm.
then you can start understanding the greater and greater circles that
Right.
is happening. And for me right now, it's I know that understanding that is happening, and then seeing the larger energies that are moving through our culture right now.
Mhm.
It's hard for me to hold on to that, even like hold on to that everything is spirit and it's working in that way. And so that's where my leading edge right now is, like, even this computer.
Totally. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mineral being. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally.
And then being in right relationship with that.
Right.
But I feel like that is the birthplace of having true land acknowledgement, is having that very personal, very immediate relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that a little more because you're getting into sort of what I consider to be like if you're going to do land acknowledgement, and we're not even talking about ritual offerings right now, unless of course you want to say that your breath is a ritual offering, which is actually totally legitimate. Um, you have to get to this place where the words that you're saying are not sort of dead or pre-scripted kinds of these, things that we say because we're guilty and we need to say them to sort of be forgiven or nonsense that doesn't make any sense. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we're getting to this place where land acknowledgement needs to be a immediate moment, like kind of sensation based relationship kind of process in which you don't zoom away too fast from the
Mm.
from the reality that you're on muddy land, or like there are caterpillars on your shoe or whatever, because we do often sort of mystify the land as sort of out there-ness, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
land is kind of this mysterious primordial forest that exists in some kind of Narnia. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Exactly.
there's some Narnia, there's some like Amazonian pristine, this idea of the pristine and the primitive and the wild and the sort of non-human are all kind of wrapped together in this strange mythology of like precious, unreachable, unintelligible kind of yeah, sauce or soup or something. Um,
Totally. Yeah.
and
It's
what
it almost like a black box, I
yeah,
feel like,
yeah,
like
right. Well, it's
It's
part of that green wall you're talking about too, right?
right.
The green wall is that there's like this massive Rosetta Stone somewhere that you can't read, or like there's just some weird thing that you have placed multiple there. Well, not you, but like the culture has placed multiple sort of ideological barriers to entry, right?
Absolutely.
Like we don't know how to walk, so we can't even do anything. Like we don't know how to like open the door. We don't even know where the door is. Like blah blah blah. There's all of this kind of like what, but there's a lot of buts, in this conversation for people.
Yeah, and then I'm like, put your butt in the ground.
Yeah, totally. Right.
Right. And that's the thing that one of the people I really admire who talks about this kind of thing. Oh gosh, and this is where I lose my words. It's so silly. But he talks about rewilding. I'm connected with him. I've done some. He's on Facebook. I forget. He's in Bauer.
Oh yeah, Peter Michael Bauer.
Peter. Yes. Okay. Thank you. You know, I really appreciate a lot of his energy about it. Because it makes it real for us that nature is still like, even the raccoons that eat your garbage in the middle of the city, like the dandelions that come up in the cracks, the pigeons that bob their head at you and then turn, like they're all witnessing you,
Right.
and they are there for you to engage with. And I think some people do that.
Yeah.
But it's on this, like you were saying, this othering. They're outside of me.
Right.
And or they're in just like this special moment that I had this crazy experience with this animal, and then it's like that's there. And that's where I feel like land acknowledgement, giving people permission to allow that to feel like love. I don't know how
Totally.
that, that they're being witnessed by these animals. And even so to bring it even to a less esoteric thing, the food that you get from the fast food restaurant
right
is loving you. Like
right.
It's not like, we can talk about all the different like systems where it's breaking it down so it's not real food or whatever, but nature made its way through that too.
Right. There is no not nature, right? So it's like we do compartmentalize that there is somehow a nature and a non-nature. And that somehow there's an artificial and a real.
Right.
And it's like, but what is the artificial made of?
Right. Right.
It's like just,
Yeah.
like it's very much like what reality is, like nature and is reality. So therefore, even the things that we have warped into a strange shape or mutated is still nature. It's just maybe not in right relationship with nature.
Right. Exactly. But then you're acknowledging. So here's the crux of that, is that there is still a through line there of survival and caregiving that is happening. And I think that is, for me, that is what nature is. It is this, like, whether it's in a perfect form that we judge it as,
right,
it's moving in the way that it does. And so that brings me back to what we were talking about before in terms of creating that sanctuary. Is like you're creating it within your own energetic realm, that you're acknowledging that this is happening, and it's being able to be non-dual about that, of saying, yes, there is all of this structure that is not in right relationship, but I can create this right relationship right now.
Right.
And acknowledging that as you acknowledge it, there is magic being done. There is it wants to be witnessed, and it is witnessing you. And so that is something I also learned. So I I was trained in to be a yoga teacher, but through a teacher who is incredibly down to earth punk rock about yoga and very much not about asanas at all.
Right.
About acknowledging that the spirit of the divine is within everything, and it knows so much more than we do. And that's also with nature, of like there, and her name's Molly Landon Kinney, and she also has a sister. Her sister passed away, but created this forest school called Cedar Song, also up here in Bainbridge Island, or Vashon Island.
Oh, Vashon. Okay.
Vashon. And creating those spaces within your life where you are acknowledging that the gift that you are being given, so of being alive, that we, by receiving this food, even if it's not perfect in the terms of the overworld is judging it as, or you are judging it as, that just acknowledging the gift.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is that sense of witnessing the gift
Mm-hmm.
that we are being given starts that engine of, I am acknowledging you, you are acknowledging me. And then you can start to see, okay, well, this might not be perfect the way it is, but this is how I can change it, but in right relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So that I see where, because I want to caregive for it now.
Yeah. Right. So there is this idea, or not even just an idea, but there's the burgeoning recognition that the entirety of the world is nature, and nature is a kind of reciprocal caregiver because we're nature, right? Like, and
Right.
there's the custodial caregiving relationship that indigenous people have with the land, in which like they're taking care of the land and the land is taking care of them.
Right.
And even if you just want to talk about survival and protection, that's a, you could just go that far and like everything else is woo woo. You could be like, everything else is woo woo, I just want survival, protection, and nourishment. And even in that process, you sort of receive the spiritual,
Right.
because it's like, wow, isn't it amazing that you got to eat food, and that your kid got to eat food, and like, wow, this is like, it's holy and sacred that you were sort of gifted the ability to have one more day of living in a body. You know what I mean? Like, it's just very
Yep.
basic. This is very basic, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Very basic. But for me, that acknowledgement, which is not often tied, so it's often tied to, a lot of people say prayers about food, but it's tied to the God, right?
Right. Right. Right.
So the upper level of what, and for me, it's like, well, let's get down into like the microbes are feeding the soil, which is feeding the plant, which is feeding me, and then my body will eventually feed the soil.
Mm-hmm.
And and even, yeah, just acknowledging that there's that happening
Mm-hmm.
is very basic, but there's so many people who are disconnected from that reality.
Totally.
And
Nope.
so it, having, and I think it's so personal. And that's when I thought about talking to you today, is like, yeah, I can tell people how to do whatever land acknowledgement that I think would be what we
Right.
need right now, but
Like
it
the
really,
recipe.
yeah, the recipe. But that would also be being a part of that overculture
Mm-hmm.
way of being,
Mm-hmm.
and it won't last.
Mm-hmm.
It's prescriptive,
Right.
which is not right relationship.
Right. And that's
It's
yeah.
pathological.
Totally. And, that's sort of I want to sort of, maybe go into the end of our conversation today here along those lines, because there is the urge to be told the right way, which is, you've told me a lot in this conversation about, how you were, wise teachers or indigenous people taught you things that you didn't know and they made your life better. So there is something to the kind of like, please, wise person, give me the recipe so that I can just start doing the thing.
Right.
Which is also the point of like, I want you, I'm wondering if you want to take us through a little kind of like a little story time in which like, how did you introduce this to the kids? Right? Because the
Mm,
kids were not think because you can't go theory with the kids, like whatever,
right.
But you do have to start to introduce those kids to land acknowledgement, which might include offerings. Like there is a kind of ritualistic recipe process or something we could call something like that. Um, but yeah, maybe take us through a little bit of like how you introduce this stuff to children.
Mm. Well, well, it's part of being. So you have to, for me, it had to start with having relationship with the children
Mhm.
that they trusted me.
Right.
So a lot of play
Hmm.
at first, of being in nature,
Okay.
of immersing yourself in, um, being outside all the time, having when they would be like, "Oh, this thing," and you'd be like, "Oh yeah, what do you think about that?" And they're like,
Hmm.
"Oh, or what do you want to do with it?" Because oftentimes when children first get into nature, they want to smash it, or they want to,
Yeah.
they want to hit it with a stick,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is allowable,
Yeah.
but I would start with uh, helping them identify. It's very contextual because it's
Right.
hard to be prescriptive about this,
Totally.
but just being like, well, what? So let me think about a story that I could say that's early on in that engagement. Um, so I'm thinking about a little girl that came into our school. She was very in her body, in her mind, very about herself. And yeah, there was a moment of seeing a caterpillar and being like, ew, ew, what is that thing? Like, ew, I get it away from me. And I'd be
Hmm.
like, well, this is a little fuzzy bear and it has a home and just like you. And so starting to talk about the relationship that it has in terms that it's parallel to you.
Hmm.
Not that it's, don't pick it up and like start to like love it
Yeah.
immediately. Just
Yeah.
this is a thing that exists outside of you, that has its own little life, and
Hmm.
it has its own, and isn't it wonderful that it came to us today to visit?
Hmm.
Like this is a guest in our space and we are a guest in its space. Like, and then having that be a continual discussion that happens regarding everything that they notice.
Right.
So, and then when they have the impulse to like hit something or destroy something, or like, well, how would you feel if that, talking about empathy in
Right.
regards to that thing. And then when it happens like magic, is that when you start having those conversations and then you model, so for that, it's modeling
Hmm.
of me, I'm so grateful the sun is shining on my face and
Right.
it's feeding all of this,
Hmm.
these plants that are absorbing it and creating nourishment for themselves. And like, so I'm talking about that in a poetic way too,
Hmm.
not being like, well, let's talk about photosynthesis,
Right.
you know.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right.
But
Right.
just instilling wonder
Hmm.
in my engagement,
Right.
and then it bubbles up. They start to create their own ceremonies
Right. And then the
when
land
they.
acknowledgement and the nature empathy that is the land acknowledgement start to just be how they are playing.
Right. Exactly. And then wanting to create little like nature designs and like with dead leaves and wanting to create little homes for animals. I mean, that's a big one, is like
Mm,
creating little homes that they could come in and out of.
mm-hmm.
And then it's also caregiving for, so recognizing when a plant is struggling, and
Right.
you're like, oh, let's make its soil fluffy, and let's take off these dead leaves, and let's like
Mm-hmm.
caregive for it. So, and then it becomes, but it's also for my practice is like singing to the land,
Sure.
singing,
Right.
when your heart feels like you want to express
Right.
like
Mm-hmm.
love for whatever is happening, then create or
Right.
sing a song.
Totally.
But it's also,
Totally.
it can be very structured. It
Right.
just, it depends on how much time you have
Totally.
together,
Right.
right?
Right. 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 Mm-hmm. Right.
So, and I feel like that informs a lot of that is a sensation that I do not get when I hear a lot of land acknowledgement.
That's exactly, yes, exactly. Exactly. Right.
There's no joy or love or like gratitude, like it's an acknowledgement, but it's not a gratitude.
Right. Right. They're sort of like what I call dead words, you know.
Yeah,
It's like you're just kind of saying the script that you're deeply uncomfortable with because you don't want to touch the feelings that are happening
right.
inside your body because quite frankly a lot of land acknowledgement is essentially a kind of strange punishment, like for a lot of people where like now we have to do this thing because it's nice and we are guilty. And but what you're talking about and what I'm also trying to get to with people is that if you can get to this place where play, caregiving, nourishment, reciprocity, protection are all kind of the same thing, like ceremony, like you're playing with ceremony, you're playing with caregiving. Caregiving is a joy, right? Like
Yeah,
you're not like, oh, here's another thing I have to do. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
oh no, now I have to do the land acknowledgement or else I'll be a bad boy and they'll put me in the social justice prison or whatever the fuck people think is going to happen to them. But
Right.
we're really getting to the place where that green wall becomes a kind of friend that you might
Mm,
not understand, but there's also a bit of like, well, I don't have to understand someone or some ones, plural. I don't have to necessarily understand everything in order to start this kind of playful kindness game, right?
yep,
And then
exactly.
of course, when we bring in all the ways that humans spontaneously give care, which does include singing and dancing and making art, like those are
Right.
things of care, making gifts, like those are very caregiving based things, is that then I think the doorway to sort of maybe more technical aspects of land management or land custodianship will then be built on top of this pre-existing wholeness, this love kind of feeling, right? It's like you're not jumping into the technical, managerial, or custodial aspects before you have this sense of wonder,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. 100%. And that's where I see a lot of actions that are well intentioned for um, helping what we perceive as a lack in the land. And I
That's right.
one thing that I really strongly hold is about invasives.
Right.
This judgment of invasives and this judgment of even, I mean, this is one that I'm working on, but judgment of species dying.
That's right. That's right.
That is a human judgment
Right.
about timelines.
Yeah, totally.
So and you don't want to let go of all of that. That grieving
Right.
is important, but it's not the driver of the relationship.
That's right.
Coming from a place of like trying to manage your grief through implementation of structures on the land is something that I see a lot that is happening. And I do really feel that that piece, that where it needs to start is that loving kindness relationship with the land. And then you'll understand, oh yeah, laying on all of these chemicals to kill Scotch broom
Yeah.
is not the way to go.
Right.
And I can explain that, and I have
Right.
in my activism work in
Right.
terms of scientific reasoning,
Right.
but I know that it's true because of that relationship that I have with the land.
Right.
And so I feel like that's the shift that we're working on right now.
Right.
And it's also, for me, it's each individual giving themselves permission to feel loved
Yes.
by the earth.
That's right. Yeah, totally. 100%. Like, and the attachment work that I sort of, figured out through my convoluted, life story was that Western attachment talks about human to human love and secure attachment and being able to receive and make mistakes and bounce back and all that stuff. But they are never talking about the fact that indigenous people are doing that with the land first. That's the primary relationship.
Yep,
It's not
100%.
it's not mother to child is the primary human relationship or the
Yep.
primary sort of mammalian relationship, but that's not the primary relationship. You see, right?
Yep, 100%. And that's where I feel like why I'm being given permission to come. Like, I just have acknowledged like some of my craziness in my early childhood, and everything was knowing that,
Right.
and then not having anybody to acknowledge it for me.
Right.
And that is the process that we're working through right now, is that relationship to the land is primary for all of us.
Right.
And it's actually a birthright, I feel.
Yeah.
And that we are breaking down all these mental constructs that we've created to separate us from it. But
Right.
it's so joyous to me. I like, once I was able to really acknowledge that and give myself permission that my relationship with land and weather too, and with all elementals,
Yeah. Right.
is so valid.
Right. Right.
Like more valid than anything else. And in my life, it's primary.
Right.
And that I don't need to do it in any kind of like way that I'm being told. For a long time is like, I need to find the right way.
Right.
Just like you were talking about, other people do. I mean, other people, this is something that we're all walking through, is like being able to be fully allow that love into ourselves is gorgeous.
Totally. Well, I mean, I feel very grateful for being able to have this conversation with you today, because it really, this little mini series is really coming together very. I'm just overjoyed, because I really do feel that, like, we are walking each other through this kind of weird decolonial process, but it has to happen in our own behaviors, in our own bodies, and we need to get these primaries sort of, we got to clean up that altar, like the land and us relationship that has been so maligned over the last few hundreds and thousands of years. We're coming back to the reality that, like, we can't go on existing this way, because we're hurting ourselves by hurting the land. By living in certain ways that are sort of dead, we create that kind of death everywhere we go, and within our own relationships and all that kind of stuff, it breeds the angst, right? It breeds the angst.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I feel so powerfully about is that the earth, when we separate it and other it, we are disavowing it of the power. We are saying you don't actually have the power that you have.
that's
And
right.
once we realize just how regenerative and how generous the earth can be for us, with if we are in right relationship, it breaks down all of that. It's just like one of the primary things that I did as a practice of sending my grief to the earth, and and also being gratitude that she was taking it.
Yeah.
But please, at first it was like, I don't know if I can give this to you, you're hurting so bad. And then it's like the more that I gave it is like, oh,
Hmm.
you are infinite.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I was misperceiving you, like,
Yes,
and trying to
exactly.
protect you from me. And actually this is what you desire,
Mhm.
and how we become more alive,
That's
just,
right.
yeah, and stop living these dead ways. Because with that joy and love, you're like, oh, then I can make this right choice, and I don't
Hmm.
have all of these like tendrils of angst and grief and
Hmm.
uh stuckness
Exactly.
that freezes me from
Yeah.
making right action.
That's right. Yeah. One thing that Eduardo Duran says is like, uh, don't let your suffering go to waste.
Yes. Yeah. Don't
Like,
keep it all inside of yourself and then kill yourself before you're dead. Like,
yeah, right,
yeah,
right,
totally.
right. And there's a difference here. I just want to be clear with people because there is like hidden techniques in what we're saying. It's like we're not discharging it in this kind of unconscious way into another body so that that body feels invaded. We actually have to give it as a sacred gift, and that might seem impossible for some people with their PTSD, but I think what I've experienced and what you're talking about and what many indigenous people have talked about is that like the act of making something sacred, whatever that is, whatever, like your pain, your grief, your fear, whatever, the act of doing that, the act of making ceremony with the doing of that and giving it back to the earth or giving it to a spirit, that actually is one of the primary ways that humans have dealt with being human,
Right.
you know?
Yep.
Like it's not actually a transgression the way that we in the Western scientific Christian nonsense world believe it to be. In fact, 99.9% of our ancestors would just be chuckling at us for something so freaking basic, right? It's so
Right.
basic.
Yes, exactly. And I do hear them laughing because it is. I mean, but that's the thing, is like we are babies in this now
Yeah.
because we have not had these strong familial relationships
Hmm.
that have taught us this from an early age. We came knowing, we unlearned it, and
Yes,
now we are learning it again.
that's right.
And so, yes, and that's the thing. It's like being in right relationship with the land of asking permission. That's part of it, has been like, may I do this?
Hmm.
And then being able to listen, and being given that
Totally.
openness and saying, yes, please give me your grief.
Right, because sometimes certain places on the land will say no, or they'll give you another task that you have to do before you do that task. Like
Exactly.
there is a complexity here that is not as simple. Like it's not like a toilet bowl. You don't just like put your
Right.
poop in the toilet bowl and flush it away, and it's like goes away, and you're just like okay. Well, I mean that's real to get to that. Like we have this disconnected reciprocity cycle. Like we used to pick food off of living plants, process them, eat them, and then poop directly into the ground, and have all of that be a kind of ceremonial and not ceremonial just as in um, ritualistic or imaginal, but ceremonial as in like knowing where to put things in the land because of the relationships of other beings and the kind of technical aspects of permaculture, essentially,
Yeah,
that are also ceremonial because it's just practical. Practicality is also ceremonial, you know?
absolutely. Yeah. And because of what has been happening for the last several thousands of years, since agriculture,
Yeah.
basically, like where this drive is outside of what the land is asking for, right?
Hmm.
It's being done to rather than in relationship.
Yeah.
That has been lost, and it's that intuitive knowing has to be rebuilt within our nervous systems.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's why the baby steps are so vital, but also that it's one of the things that I really feel is that that's part of what is happening, being broken down, that we are so many more beings than there's so many of us.
Yeah.
That the individuation of the relationship where it is so personal now. There's something there to that for me, and I'm still kind of figuring out what that is,
Hmm.
what it means to me, and but there is something precious to
Hmm.
me about that, and that's where anyone who's listening, I feel like when you start living in this way where you're acknowledging what you're being given and then you're asking to give, like, what may I give?
Hmm.
you were you were rebuilding that structure
Hmm.
and that like relationality
Right.
that you know how to
Right.
do. It's just releasing yourself from a lot of the talking that you do to yourself
Yeah.
about it.
Right. Right. Right.
And also I wanted to, it's one of the, oh, I just remember one of the things I really wanted to say is that releasing the naming of things,
Mm.
releasing the like it's fun to like know all the names of all the plants and all of the, I mean, that's something that is good to do, I think, but then also being able to release that and really just be able to see the plant before you
Hmm.
as its own being, or the
Yeah.
piece of grass, like just being able to witness that as an individual,
Right.
and um is super powerful. That is a being, not just like a part of all the maples everywhere, like,
Sure. Sure.
like
Right.
thinking
Yeah.
about the story of
Hmm.
that being and what it's endured and where it's been, and
Right.
what it's witnessed, and like that's a deeper like sitting with. That's what
Right.
that sit spot does, is like you start ending up being actually in relationship with an individual plant,
Right.
or
Rather than the category of the genus or the phylum that it belongs to
right,
because you want to know what this means. And yeah.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And it can be really fun to learn all that things,
Yeah.
but
Totally. Of
being
course. I'm not knocking that, but yeah.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying, is that you being able to have two minds about it, of being like, okay,
Yeah.
that's that mind, and then release that mind.
Yes.
I think that's where the power of what we've been through, the categorization and then the decategorization of like, whoo, we can now hold both worlds,
Hmm. Yeah.
and the knowledge that we have, like the deep knowledge, not just
Yeah.
like the mindscape.
Yeah. Right. Like the
Um,
experiential blood knowledge.
right,
Yeah.
is deepening for all of us.
Hmm.
And
Totally.
it's there for us if we're willing to step into it. And that's for that relationship and that giving, because then when you're in individuation with that plant, you're like, oh, I see what you need, maybe,
Mhm.
or I can hear what you need.
I can hear what you need, right? You have some sort of sense, and then of course, you have to verify that sense, but you at least have something to go on.
Right, right.
Right.
Yeah. And I think I think a lot of people would be surprised on how much everything's talking to them.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
If they would quiet and listen.
Yeah,
Yeah. And sometimes, and then also to not get offended when the plant or the land or whatever is like, just get away from me.
yeah, totally. Yeah, of course. Not
You know,
every cat wants to be petted by you
right,
in this one moment.
right, right.
Totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, this has been a really great conversation, and I'm sure that we could go on for a long time more, but I want to sort of cap it because there's just been so much here, and I want us both and everyone listening to be able to digest this. Is there anything you want to say to sort of, bring it full circle or sort of in and transition out of this conversation?
Um, well, let me sit for a moment. I think I want to acknowledge that the people that are listening to this, I feel, oh, I just feel so much love for them for inviting this kind of thinking and this kind of being into their world. And that I, I just want to welcome them into being in more relationship with the earth and the elementals that have been waiting for you to come. And they are joyous in sharing what they know. And I want to thank the hummingbirds so much. It just keeps on coming. I keep on witnessing them all the time, and they're so joyous and happy, and they are amazing creatures, like just in their ability to adapt to all different environments. And I feel like we as humans also have that. And we have this gift of being able to be in so many places on the earth, and we also have the capacity to witness and be caregivers. And I feel that as we move towards more and more of that, that we are creating a whole new way of being for ourselves. And I'm so in love with that.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much, Lee. Thank you to all of your people, all your relations, all your ancestors, and thank you to all the relations and ancestors and all the people that are listening to this, right now or wherever you are, whenever you are. Thank you so much. This has been Underworld Party, and I'm signing out for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.